the name Aileen Wuornos conjures to most the image of a wild-eyed, crazy woman who shouted profanities in court after being condemned to death for the killing of several men in Florida between 1989 and 1990. Others more sympathetic to the plight of women, even killer women, and particularly women in the sex trade, understand Aileen differently, as a sex worker who was viciously assaulted and who later spiraled into a frantic murder spree. In 2003, Patty Jenkins wrote and directed Monster, which told the story of Wuornos, played to chilling perfection by Charlize Theron, and the murder she committed from a different perspective. Jenkins' screenplay does what many men, and the justice system itself, seem incapable of doing: believing a victim, no matter how difficult. While there's no doubt Wuornos killed the men that she was convicted of killing, her story isn't one that requires much suspension of belief, considering the way in which society disregards women and victims, and even less when those victims are sex workers.
You don't take fucking human life like this and just sabotage and rip it apart like Jesus on the cross and say thanks a lot for all the fucking money I made off of you. And not care about a human being and the truth being told. Now I know what Jesus was going through.
The story of Monster brings to life a full characterization of Aileen Wuornos. This isn't a snapshot of documentary footage focused on her mental health issues. Neither is it an exploitative look at her victimization. Jenkins delivers an unflinching look at how Aileen's story is a worst-case scenario for when a society warped by patriarchy refuses to understand the many complex ways in which women are forced to either take the relentless abuse of men or become a monster in the process of defending themselves. Men are usually offered the benefit of the doubt in terms of character. Just like in real life, in fiction women are too frequently presented as characters who need to uphold an air of appearing perfect. This is a major problem for men in general when it comes to sexual assault and rape, accepting there are no perfect victims. In reality, women are human beings, and human beings are never perfect. Neither do they need to be, as it doesn't have anything to do with why somebody would assault them or how they react to the assault. Jenkins' screenplay gives the audience a taste of sweet and sour, both showing the violence in Aileen's life as well as the tender moments with Selby Wall, played by Christina Ricci, the fictional counterpart of the real Tyria Moore. As a result, the woman that most pass off as merely insane and murderous is presented as a fully realized, three-dimensional character. The lesbian relationship between Selby and Aileen speaks to the relationships Wuornos had with men all her life, as a woman near constantly abused in one way or another, from the time she was a girl to the day she died. The audience is allowed to see an emotional side to Aileen. She and Selby start off tenuously, eventually moving in together, and later going on the run together too. It's an at times beautiful, if not rocky, romance. Mostly we see how far driven from men Aileen was, spending her days and evenings doing sex work just to pay the bills so she could go home to her girlfriend. Aileen's narration during some of these scenes also alludes to earlier abuse she suffered as a younger woman and a girl, furthering the idea that she was at the very least fed up with men. Selby became a turning point, not only in terms of sexual orientation. She was way out for Aileen, one she never pictured with men. Selby was an affirmation that sex could be beautiful rather than a violent business transaction, and Aileen realized she was able to love somebody. It's grimly fitting, then, that the sweetness of Aileen's relationship with Selby is juxtaposed with the horror of the sexual assault, precipitating Aileen's trail of murder.
We were sitting on the floor watching TV, and she just come out and said, "I have something to tell you." And I asked her what, and she said that she had shot and killed a man that day. Being graphic for the sake of being graphic has its time and place.
Normally, when dealing with real-life cases of horror and tragedy, explicit graphic detail isn't always a great choice, even more so when such cases involve sexual assault. Yet Jenkins opts to include a scene of brutal violence, which is interesting from a storytelling perspective. As a woman, she no doubt knows all too well how women and the victimization of women have been exploited in the media, from news to movies. Although it remains compelling because despite how it might look on the surface, this scene is all but the crux on which the entire film rests. The whole purpose of Monster, even in its loaded title, is to reevaluate how people see Aileen Wuornos, both as a person and as a perceived monster. So Jenkins, including a scene where a John, played by Lee Turgeson, rapes Aileen, something she always claimed as being the reason for the initial killing, is not an innocuous decision. This is surely seen as exploitation through certain eyes. The whole scene is pure terror and the nastiest details are vivid. However, this scene serves as a mission statement by Jenkins, effectively saying, "I believe you, Aileen." This is done without necessarily meaning that Jenkins condones everything this woman did during her murder spree. But it still means, I believe you. It's significant that Aileen's rape is addressed as a way of affirming the film isn't attempting to make the same old judgments about her crimes. It's just as significant how Jenkins refuses to make her into any more of a victim than she was to begin. Yes, the story shows Wuornos falling into unlikely love with Selby. Yes, the rapist gets what most of us surely believe he deserved. Yet the rest of the murders still occur, and Jenkins doesn't lead her audience into believing otherwise. Still, the assault and Aileen's revenge preceding all this allows the audience to assume a perspective the courts, the judge, and the lawyers fighting to secure a conviction denied her initially. The belief that a woman who lives on the streets working in the sex trade can be assaulted, regardless of whether she has to commodify her body for survival.
He said, "You're gonna do everything I tell you to do, and if you don't, I'll kill you right now, and I'll fuck you after."
In a sense, Monster is an anthem for all women who are victims of sexual assault or rape, and how it refuses to accept patriarchal views about women and sex. These views in turn affect women like Aileen by using their lifestyle, usually one they did not choose, although even if they did, it's their choice to make, against them in saying that they are unable to be raped. Jenkins and Theron fearlessly engage the audience in this act of brutality in order to hammer home what many of us already know. Anyone can be raped, and it's never the fault of the victim, always the fault of the one doing the raping. The audience can't excuse Aileen for the rest of the murders, but the film presents her story in a way that the audience is able to see why she wound up on such a destructive path after experiencing such horrific traumas. In this light, the title Monster takes on new meaning, as in the film becomes an illustration of how a patriarchal society can turn a woman into a monster. Jenkins' Monster tells the story of victimization and re-victimization through Aileen Wuornos. In the beginning, Aileen was made a victim of a predatory rapist. Patriarchal society wouldn't accept a sex worker trying to find a new line of work, let alone claiming a prospective customer raped her. And so with a lack of options, Aileen first sought revenge on a rapist, then fell into a downward spiral of killing men who weren't actually being violent with her and making them into her own victims. We also get brief glimpses into Aileen's life throughout the screenplay, offering more suggestions that perhaps she was assaulted and turned into a victim long before she ever began working in the sex trade. Jenkins does what the best directors do when focusing their lens on a subject by refusing to judge. Instead, Monster tries leveling the playing field, asserting that any woman who's been raped or sexually assaulted deserves to be listened to. And as a society, we go against morality when we try to claim a woman's lifestyle dictates her humanity, or her ability to be victimized.
Thank you, Judge. And may you rot in hell.